Baubles, that's what I was going to start this one with. But work-life balance, you know, that's why I'm late with another film. And I don't know, I've lost track already. In the words of the great and mighty philosophers Slade, it's Christmas, or thereabouts. So I was going to start with Baubles, but I've got an older film and it's of a tank, which is what we're going to look at today, which isn't really very Christmassy. And we haven't got the Baubles out yet because we're so disorganised. This is about the best I can do. Some shiny wrapping paper. Whatever that is it a Christmas pudding? That's a snowman. And incidentally, there's a happy sheep skiing. Doesn't get more festive than that. Look, I've ripped the paper and all. Anyway, let's have a look at a tank. That's the merriment over with. It's going to get complicated for a moment. What I'm going to show you is the Airfix 172nd Chieftain tank. I would like to have shown you the Airfix 172nd Centurion tank, but I seem to have lost most of the film. So we're starting with a picture of both. We'll end by looking at both together. But after this section, I'm actually going to show you the boxes of the Chieftain tank. I've got that the wrong way around. Of the Centurion tank and a Jagdpanzer. It'll all work itself out in the end. Stay with it. How about this? Two tanks, very different in so many ways, if era if nothing else. I'm not going to do two tanks in one film this time. Just showing these two because I dug them out of a box. I'd almost forgotten I had them, and I'd part painted them. So let's get them done. This one, a nice old matchbox. Looking forward to that. And an Airfix. I never made a Chieftain tank as a kid. They were a bit contemporary to me. Let's face it, to me, Thin Lizzy are a new band. So, you know. And I kind of left the newer stuff. Now it's looking fabulously antique, so I'm going to enjoy that too. And I just love these ones that the Germans came up with. Things like the Sturmgeschütz, the Brummbär and all of that kind of thing. The turretless monster tanks. Really enjoy them. So what one are we going to do this time? I don't know. Let's see. When I opened the box, I found I'd already sprayed this in a very dark brown, and I think I was planning to have it really rather muddy for a lot of reasons. Might go into that later. So I will pursue that further. I was very interested in reading the very small bit of information that it starts with the main battle tank of the British Army, the Chieftain, is probably the most powerfully armed and best armoured tank in use today. That was a long time ago then, wasn't it? So, yeah, nice and, as I say, antique. So anyway, here we are with dark brown. I'm going to do things like wheels and tracks very muddy, and the bodywork not too much wear and tear, I think. Just put the first few bits together, and a very nice detail has come out. There's the parts that go, you know, hold the wheels. I've glued those on to the other side. You can just see them there. But what is nice is this. There's two different types of housing. This one in particular is different to those two, just in a little detail. But to make sure you get it right, they've got 3 holes for the pins. This one's a pyramid shape with an apex. This one's the other way up, base line and the apex below. And so is that. So you can't get it wrong. That's good design. We don't need it, we're all very capable, but really, you know, that's what you pay your money for, isn't it? That kind of thing. I've got to put these little return rollers. Are they bogies? I was going to lay all those out as well, but I'm only you only need to nudge it like that and they'll go rolling all over the show. So I will be cutting them off one by one and gluing them on one by one. Never mind. Just put the first few bits together and a very nice detail has come out. There's the parts that go, you know, hold the wheels. I've glued those on to the other side. You can just see them there. But what is nice is this. There's two different types of housing. This one in particular is different to those two, just in a little detail. But to make sure you get it right, they've got 3 holes for the pins. This one's a pyramid shape with an apex. This one's the other way up, base line and the apex below. And so's that. So you can't get it wrong. That's good design. We don't need it, we're all very capable, but really, you know, that's what you pay your money for, isn't it? That kind of thing. I've got to put these little return rollers. Are they bogies? I was going to lay all those out as well, but you only need to nudge it like that and they'll go rolling all over the show. So I will be cutting them off one by one and gluing them on one by one. Never mind. You know what? I'm going to save those return rollers right till the very last bit of all the wheels, because I'm just going to knock them about. So far so good. I've got 2 pairs of wheels, a little bit wobbly. I'll straighten them out and then just showing you the other little bits. If I were making this again, I would glue the wheels onto the housings before gluing everything onto the strip, the plate itself. I used to know the words for these parts, never mind. Anyway, so yeah, I'd do that because as I'm putting the wheels on, I'm knocking the housings off, which means good idea to not put the return bogies on yet. So, learning as we go. Just a slightly odd feature worth mentioning. The rear, the drive, oops, getting attached to the glue there. See those 2 sprocketed wheels, they push onto a pin. That's great. But over here, the opposite. These 2 have a pin pushed into them which then goes into a hole. And getting the pin through the hole there is pretty tough, but then it only just sticks out enough to go in there. It would have been nicer to have had one of those. Although in the past, I remember as a kid, particularly on things like the Tiger and the Panther, as you push those on, that would snap. So, I don't know, half and half. The other thing is, I broke my rule. I took the pair of these off simultaneously, and yes, I nudged it, as I just did then, and one of them rolled away. Found it in the end. Another lesson to learn is, if you're going to go through, if you're going to film yourself making something, and in particular when the light isn't good, don't spray everything dark brown. First of all, it's not showing up very well, is it? I do apologise. Secondly, I can't read the numbers on the sprue. There's the pin. We start work on the fuselage, on the hull. And very interestingly, there's a sort of inner body frame, which is quite good because it's going to give the side stability, and very often that is a problem. So yet again, good design work. Well, this is probably the wobbliest of all the hulls I ever remember making. There is an air of House of Cards about it. There isn't a kind of single foundation stone, a solid single object that you can glue the others onto. They all need sort of gluing together. I had to take the rear plate off. God, it's just black, isn't it? Because it basically has too many plates spinning simultaneously. So now I'm going to let this dry, and at all the pushing around I've loosened this wheel up, so now that's going to be a problem forevermore. I can see why they had that thrown in. So, time to have a nibble of something. While I'm waiting for the hull to dry really well, because it's still a bit wobbly, I've moved on now to the turret. I've put the two halves together. What's interesting is I just gave them a try out because there was some heavy sprue needed cutting off. And I just thought I'll push them together to see how they go, and they fit perfectly. There is no glue. That's just pushed together. Yet again, good design. Well done. Did you spot the obvious error? I haven't put the gun in. So you have to get that in as you put the two sides together. Yeah, well, it wasn't going to make it go up and down anyway, so that's fine. The other thing is, this is one of those two-sided turrets which I mentioned when I was doing the Tiger tanks. And everybody was really polite to not really ridicule me. I said, I wonder why they make the turrets in two halves. Well, it's obviously to do with the mould, isn't it? Because I should think all of these models are made out of two-piece moulds. So you have to be able to pull the two parts of the mould apart without causing any damage. If you made a more complex shape, the mould wouldn't come apart and you'd have to make it a 3 or 4 part mould. It's really simple stuff. I just don't know what I'm on about at times. The other rather daft thing I did is I assumed I couldn't get the two sides of the turret apart to put the gun in. Then I gave it a go and it worked. So there's the gun in the turret. Nice little lid, for want of a better phrase, on the turret. There's a lot of glue there at the moment because it didn't want to sit perfectly at the front, so I just dolloped a bit too much glue on, unfortunately. But yes, there is this lid which makes it very easy to get all the little hatches on. I'm not going to do the gun and the light yet because I'll knock them off. There's more to be done on the turret, so I'll do all that in one go as well. What's that about? I've put the back plate on and it's forced the side off the base of the hull, so that is a gap. After all that great design, the hull is miserable, so I'm going to have to take the back plate off and trim various bits up so I'm going to get it all to fit back together. Everything else has been going so well. This is a good model up to this point, and oh yeah, as predicted, the front wheel came off. Therefore, I'm enjoying this bracket. You can still see there's gaps, so I've got to work on that. I just put the bracket on to see if it helps, and it will. Very, very interesting. There's a, don't know if this will show up, there's a little rib there, you can just see it, which runs either side of the square hole, and obviously that sits on the edges, along the edges there, and it's neatly shown in the instructions. I've got to sort the lighting out here, haven't I? You can see it as a dotted line telling us that's underneath, and also there's two little pins. Can I find them? Will they show up? Oh, just right by me thumb there, and they sit in notches which probably won't show up so well there, and that is going to help pull all this together. I have trimmed bits off, but it still wants to spring out. Not as bad as it was though. Now this is rotten. I've put the top of the hull on, and you can see the difference in the colour. The original green plastic. Is that focusing? No. Anyway, the original green plastic, which hasn't been sprayed, and the brown, which has. So you can see there's a system by which the two fit together. If you do that, absolutely nothing else fits together. So the principle of this bracket is really good, but the detail of it, getting everything to fit, isn't. So I'm squeezing the top and the bottom of the hull together, and the back's had to come off again. I can see why they've got this bracket. I said that before. So something somewhere, probably just one part, and I suspect it's the bottom of the hull, is just fractions of a millimetre out here and there. It's making it horrible. So while the hull continues to dry for about the 4th time, it's getting messy now, I've put various boxy bits on the turret. Is that meant to be sticking off like that? No, that one there's going wrong. Odds and ends at the back, and I'm going to try and put those 4 fairly easily placeable things on the top of the hull. Well, the tracks haven't proved any better. They're a very hard version of soft. So here is a track, but it doesn't have that rubbery quality. This is a hard plastic and it has a lot of resistance. So it didn't like going around the wheels. So with the greatest irony in the world, I have cut the tracks up into little sections, just like I try to avoid doing. And, well, here we go. We ended up with tracks glued in little sections. I don't know how visible that is. And lots of glue stuck all over it. But I was going to make it muddy anyway, so that's okay. And then having done that, and it's now sitting there waiting to dry and get a bit of a trim, I then realised I'd forgotten to put the little return track bogies on. What a shambles on my part. Mostly I blame that back end not fitting properly or something like that, but I should have kept my wits about me, shouldn't I? Anyway, it's progressing bit by bit. Green, the washing machine's just kicked off. A quick light spray, which I think has gone quite well. I'm happy with that. And yeah, it actually, because it had the kind of brown undercoat, it took very little spray to get some kind of shade of green, and at the same time there is a little bit of sort of natural shading going on. If the weather bucks up, and it looks like it might do, we'll get it outside and see what real light can do with the colour. Now the washing machine really has. Well, there it is, done. Yeah, it got messy in the middle, I suppose, and the tracks didn't go particularly well, did they? That was a bit of a tragedy. But all, you know, all things considered, good model, predominantly well designed, comes out all right in the end, I think, and actually I did enjoy making it, and solving those problems can be part of the fun. So, well, it is generally, but my aim is to do them as simply as possible. So yes, it's good, and it has the look and the feel of a very impressive tank. I know an awful lot of them got sold to an awful lot of countries during the 60s and 70s, but remarkably, sometimes little bits and pieces of corruption come to light, don't they? So who knows how good it was in that respect, sales-wise. I know a good few people rate this tank quite nicely, so that's good. Yes, it's that was fun, yeah. And there it is, sitting there quite proudly outside, which I feel enhances it somewhat and allows me to cover up some of the problems. So that's working out all right as well. So the next thing to do is have a quick look at the final shots of the other tank, which was the Centurion. Now I've just worked it out. Centurion, Roman Centurion, you see. The establishment loves the Romans. And the Chieftain came after it because they're trying to show that they're up to date and modern as the 50s, 60s and 70s moved into a more interesting time, focusing a little more on things like paganism and indigenous tribal groups in the British Isles. How about that for a way of remembering it? So anyway, here it comes. It'll be along any second now. Here we are. There's the box. Very optimistic. I don't know what happened to all the bits of film. This happens from time to time. Things just disappear. That's computers. That's how they're going to take over the world. Anyway, the model. It was good. There weren't any problems at all, unlike the one we've just seen. It all went together smoothly. It's quite a simple model. Straightforward stuff. Once again, I hadn't made it. As a kid, it was too modern and now-ish, which leads on to a very interesting story. I nearly got killed, actually twice, by Chieftain tanks. One worth mentioning is, I used to go on holiday around Dorset, and of course there's the Bovingdon tank trials area, and we were driving through it at one point, or round the edge of it or something, heading to Lawrence of Arabia's cottage, I believe, and on the right an enormous Chieftain tank came over a mound of earth and crashed down right next to us, seriously right next to us. I was sitting in the back looking out the window. I was thrilled to bits, but the thankfully the turret was turned slightly and the gun wasn't pointing our way. And he just kept coming, and we drove past, and I looked out the back window, and it just carried on going. So I was within feet of one of these. I just remembered it, seeing the shots outside. As for a, sorry, when I say one of these, Chieftain, as for a Centurion, no. And I don't think I ever saw one of those on the move. Very interesting tank, though. Could have almost made it into the Second World War, but was literally probably weeks away from getting to Europe when the war ended. So you could look at this as one of the last tanks of the Second World War, and definitely look at it as Britain finally getting its act together to come up with a decent tank, rather than being either decades behind what the Germans are doing, or simply, as far as I can tell, digging their heels in and pretending tank warfare doesn't exist, and we're all going to get back on our horses shortly because they're all just public school toffs who think everything happens from horseback. That's my view. You may disagree, but there we go. That's just how I see Britain's failure to cope with tank warfare in the Second World War. And we'll look at this sometime. There are bits of documentary evidence that seems to back it up. But anyway, two good tanks, two good models, and sitting there together in dusk, looking all right, really. I hope you enjoyed it. And so that only leaves me to say, I don't know what's coming next. I don't know when it will come next. And thank you for watching, and Merry Christmas. All of that. So, jingle bells. This really wasn't a Christmassy topic, was it? I'm not really genetically a Christmassy person, I think. My idea of a good Christmas film is the early 20th century version of Nosferatu, but there we go.